There are races that start out normal and end up in a love triangle without me asking. It was supposed to be just a quiet trip. Pick up a girl, then a guy, and drop them both off at the same destination. But the second he got into the car and sat next to her, the mood changed. She turned her face, looked at him and said, "And you?" And he answered, "Rachel?" There I realized I was in the middle of something. They were ex-lovers. And neither of them knew the other was going to be there. Now imagine you're driving while two exes decide to flirt with you just to provoke each other. If you enjoy true stories that seem unreal, leave a like and subscribe to the Backseat Secrets channel. This race was a roller coaster, and the ending will surprise you. Stay with me until the end. My name is Ethan, I live in San Diego, and I've been driving for rides for about 3 years. I like to ride at night, less traffic, less heat, and usually fewer freaked out people, well, most of the time. That night was Saturday, around 11 p.m. I'd already done a few easy runs and was thinking about calling it a day. My plan was to stop at the drive-thru, grab a snack, and go home to binge watch some series, which I'd fall asleep in between. The weather was pleasant, the city had that typical weekend buzz. Couples leaving restaurants, people going to parties, the occasional drunk hitchhiker, the routine. That's when a ride appeared on the app with 2 stops. First, pick up a woman named Rachel in Pacific Beach. Second, pick up another person downtown and drive them both to North Park. I looked at the ratings for both 5 stars, everything was fine. The estimated total travel time was about 25 minutes. A good ride to end the night. I accepted without a second thought, headed toward the first stop, and turned up the playlist a bit. I really thought I'd end that ride with a good tip and a clear conscience. But when Rachel got into the car, and so did the second passenger, well, let's just say I learned an important lesson. Never underestimate the destructive power of a poorly timed reunion. I arrived at the first stop and parked. It was a quiet residential area, with a few houses with lights on, music playing in the distance. Rachel appeared quickly, smiling brightly, well-groomed, and looking ready for a date night. She got in the car, greeted me with a friendly, "Good evening." And I responded with that standard tone of a driver who has driven enough to seem like a nice, yet professional person. She commented something like, "I hope he doesn't take long. If there's one thing I hate, it's a late man." I laughed and said, "Look, with any luck he'll already be on the sidewalk waiting." On the app, the second stop was at a downtown shopping center. An office building, apparently. The second passenger's name? Brandon. I figured they were a couple going to a bar or dinner, because the way she was dressed, it really did look like date night. On the way there, she was checking messages on her phone and made some comments like, "Let's see if his musical taste has improved. If he comes in a sweatshirt, I'll cancel the date." I started laughing inside. It felt like the typical new couple rush, that phase where you still get butterflies in your stomach. But little did I know that the butterflies in my stomach were for another reason, and that this date would end up putting me in the middle of an unauthorized DR, which I never asked to participate in. Rachel was one of those people who's easy to talk to. Charismatic, talkative, with the kind of energy that makes time fly by in the car. She talked about the weather, how San Diego never knows whether it's summer or spring, and even commented on the perfume I was wearing, which happened to be a pretty standard deodorant, but oh well. She seemed excited. You could tell she was excited about this mystery date. With every notification on her phone, her face reacted. Sometimes she smiled, sometimes she rolled her eyes. There was a moment when she said, "If this guy is half the person he was in high school, I'm already in trouble." Curious, I asked, "Oh, you guys know each other from before?" And she replied laughing, "Long story. I'll tell you later." I thought it was just some chatter between former schoolmates who'd reconnected online. Nothing special. But looking back, that "I'll tell you later" was a harbinger that I was really going to find out everything. Whether you like it or not. The GPS warned that there were 2 minutes left to reach the second stop. Rachel pulled down the mirror from the ceiling and began to adjust herself. Lipstick, hair, checking her smile. She even put on perfume. She was clearly nervous, but in a "I want to make a good impression" kind of way. Meanwhile, there I was, calm, thinking I was about to be the involuntary Cupid for a couple about to reconnect. Poor me. We arrived at the second stop. It was an office building with those white fluorescent lights that make everything seem colder than it actually is. Brandon was already outside, fiddling with his phone, looking like he'd been waiting a while. Rachel looked out the window, arched an eyebrow, and let out a dry, "All that's missing is him." I didn't understand what she meant. Kept to myself, of course. I just parked and unlocked the doors. Brandon walked in, and the second he sat down next to her, he froze. Rachel turned slowly to him. Stare. Unblinking. He looked back pale. He only said one word. "Rachel?" And she responded in the same tone, half shock, half anger. "Brandon?" I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the exact moment they both realized they were trapped in the same car. With me. In the front seat. Eyewitness to the drama. The silence that followed was like that meeting silence that goes wrong in the first minute. A mix of shock, embarrassment, tension, and passive-aggressive judgment. They didn't say anything else for a while. And neither did I. I just turned on the radio very low to break the funeral atmosphere. There, in that instant, the race became something else. It was no longer an ordinary trip. It was an emotional turf battle. And I was in the front seat, hoping to get out alive. After a good 30 seconds of deadly silence, Rachel adjusted herself in the seat, crossed her arms and said, very quietly, but with that venomous tone that you can feel in the air, "Of course, it had to be you." Brandon took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "I thought it was another car. I didn't know it was with you." Rachel slowly turned her face towards him, with a cynical smile. "You always think you're something else, don't you, Brandon?" Ethan, or rather me, was just there, completely frozen. The radio was playing some upbeat music in the background, like Uptown Funk, which only made everything more uncomfortable. It was like the ironic soundtrack to a bad romantic comedy. Brandon then decided to try to break the ice. "Well, at least now we have a chance to talk civilly." Rachel snorted. "Civilly? In the back of an Uber? Okay then, Dr. Phil." At that point, I began staring at the GPS with the concentration of a surgeon. Every turn was a blessing. Every green light, a miracle. I just wanted to reach my destination before one of us decided to open the door and jump into motion. But the best was yet to come. Brandon turned slightly and asked, "Did you know it was me?" Rachel replied without hesitation, "Of course not. I thought I was going to meet someone new." "No, that." Silence again. And there I was, wondering what sin made me deserve that penance on wheels. The silence didn't last long. Because, of course, exes being silent in the same space is something that only happens for 5 minutes. And I was already at 4.5. Rachel turned her face slightly to the window and said loud enough for him to hear, and of course, for me too. "It's amazing how he still wears that cheap perfume. Nostalgia brings a headache." Brandon smirked, not looking at her. "At least I still have a sense of humor. You lost yours with your latest Instagram drama." Rachel turned around completely. "Oh, now you follow my social media? #1 fan." "No. They sent me. To laugh." Right then and there I realized this race was going to last forever. And that, for some cosmic reason, I had been chosen to mediate a meeting that not even the universe intended to happen. Meanwhile, I drove like someone on nitroglycerin. Without braking too much, without accelerating too much, without looking too much in the rearview mirror so as not to seem involved. But of course they weren't going to leave me out of the story for long. Rachel turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, okay? You don't deserve this. I bet you just wanted to finish your shift in peace." I tried to smile. "Yeah, it happens. I've seen couples fighting before, but I think this is new." Brandon joined the conversation. "We're not a couple. This was a mistake." Rachel replied, "Your whole thing was a mistake." Silence. Ethan, 0 words. 1,000 internal prayers. The atmosphere was so tense that it felt like the car would explode into passive-aggressive tension at any moment. I just hoped to get to my destination quickly and never see either of them again. But then, they decided to use me as an emotional shield. From that point on, the race was no longer an ordinary trip. It became a contest. And I was the prize. Rachel was the first to change focus. She turned to the front seat, leaned forward, and said with a smile as forced as the atmosphere in the car, "Ethan, huh? What a nice name. I bet you'd never leave someone waiting at the door, would you?" I let out that light laugh of someone who doesn't want to commit to absolutely anything. I try to be punctual. Brandon looked out the window, rolled his eyes, and blurted out, casually, "Oh sure. The perfect driver. Probably does yoga, reads Nietzsche, and cooks Sunday brunch." Rachel responded immediately, "Look, he's got personality, he's sarcastic. I think you have competition now, Brandon." I just wanted to be invisible at that moment. But clearly that wasn't going to happen. Brandon then decided to join the game. He looked in the rearview mirror and said to me, "Ethan, tell me something. Do you usually get passengers who talk non-stop for 40 minutes about star signs and ex-boyfriends? Or was it just today that you had bad luck?" Rachel Ryu, "You never understood what communication is, that's why we broke up." Brandon replied, "No, we broke up because you wanted to take a cat to live in your backpack. It was an orphaned puppy. That bit my laptop wires. And there I was, listening to a DR about a cat living in a backpack. This had already surpassed all logic. By this point, I was driving with such concentration that it felt like I was taking the DMV practical test. No blinking, no deep breaths. Just going. And there were still 12 minutes to go to the destination. Those minutes. After sniping at each other for nearly half the race, they'd clearly grown tired of the direct attack strategy. That's when the emotional low blow came, turning me into the outlet. Rachel took a deep breath, turned to me again and said, "You know, Ethan, you have a calm vibe. Like safe. You listen without judging. That's rare." Brandon laughed out loud. Listen without judging because he has no choice. He's driving. She didn't even blink. Still, just attentive. The kind of guy who asks if the music is good. Brandon leaned forward, rested his arm on the bench, and replied in the softest voice he could muster. "Ethan, just out of curiosity, what do you do besides drive? Because I'm sensing an artistic energy. You look like you play the guitar and write sad poetry in an old notebook." Rachel raised her eyebrows, as if she had been personally offended. "Sad poetry? Nothing to do with it. He looks like he surfs in the morning and makes pancakes for someone special on Sunday." I started laughing then. I couldn't hold it in. Because the situation had crossed any line of normality. I was in a car where two adults were flirting with me at the same time, just to prove a point to each other. And the worst part, I was getting praise for things I didn't even do. Like surfing. Mental note, maybe I should start? The song on the radio changed to a more romantic one. And I thought, if either of us asks to switch seats with the other and sit here in front, I swear I'll stop the car and become my own passenger. But they were just getting started. The two were in Cold War mode. Courtesies that were actually grenades. And I was in the middle of it all, trying to decide if this was the worst day of my life, or the most random. Suddenly, in the midst of the silent struggle for my attention, something unexpected happened. Rachel let out a laugh. The real ones. Loose. Uncontrollable. Brandon looked at her, a little confused. "What are you laughing at?" She replied, still laughing, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "Do you remember us arguing in the Taco Bell drive-thru because you ordered wrong, and I cried because the burrito wasn't vegetarian?" Brandon started laughing too. "And you made me go back and order another." Then the cashier laughed and said, "That's what a healthy couple is." They both burst out laughing. And I, in the front seat, looked like I had just been thrown out of my own plot. They went from emotional gladiators to best friends in a matter of seconds. Rachel looked at him and said, "We were really crazy." Brandon replied, "We still are. But at least now we have an Uber to testify." The two looked at each other. And there, in the middle of that car filled with tension, flirting, and references to vegetarian burritos, something I didn't expect happened. They held hands. No words, no speech. They just held hands. Ethan, that is, me, was officially out of the equation. And honestly, I was relieved. Better for them to reconnect with each other than to continue fighting over my soul every mile. But what I didn't expect was where this connection would lead. We were 2 minutes away from our final destination when Rachel picked up her phone and started typing something into the app. The GPS has updated and recalculated the route. New destination, a residential address on the other side of the city. I looked in the rearview mirror. Did you change destiny? Brandon, with a smile that mixed guilt and relief, replied. Yeah, we decided to talk a little more. Somewhere, with a sofa. Rachel completed, with a sofa and no driver in between. Ethan processing. Okay, I understand. The car's air conditioning was actually quite pleasant now. The radio played calming music. They seemed at peace. Confused, but calm. It was then that Rachel looked at me with that conspiratorial smile. You were like our therapist today. Unintentionally. But you were. Brandon nodded. Seriously, man. Thanks a lot. You were patient. And a good listener. We needed that. I laughed, a little awkwardly. Yeah. I usually hear some stories, but this one was different. She joked. If we get married one day, you'll be the best man, okay? I almost crashed the car. No, you don't need that much. One invitation to the wedding is already too much. They both laughed. And I kept driving. Now heading towards a reconciliation that only happened because an algorithm decided to put two exes in the same car, with me in the middle. The race ended around midnight. I dropped them both off in front of her building. They got out laughing, still holding hands. Rachel thanked me again. Brandon gave me a generous tip and said, it was the most emotional race of my life. And I thought, for me too, friend. For me too. On the way home, I reflected on everything. There are passengers who give you a story to tell. These two gave me a complete script complete with twists, soundtracks, and backseat reconciliation. I left that race half exhausted, half relieved, but with the certainty of one thing. If I ever go to therapy, it will only be to talk about what I've experienced as an app driver. And look, if this was the happy ending of a love story, I'm sure I was the third most random and necessary element of the equation. Oh, and no, I didn't accept being Godfather. But I got 5 stars and an episode worthy of a bad romantic comedy movie. Which, in the end, is much more worth it. If you enjoyed this crazy story, like the video and subscribe to the Backseat Secrets channel. Every week I bring you real races that you'd swear are fake. And comment there. What would you do if you were stuck in the car with your ex? Or worse, between two exes fighting over you? I'm reading everything. Until the next race.